Good morning. As promised, we are going to set up this Brembo brake caliper onto this shaved Harley Davidson fork leg, running the smaller, the mini disc on the front. I have got a nice full floating brake disc, but I wanted to run this little one because I just think it looks poo loads better. Anyway, the tip to get us started on this first of all is I get a bit of aluminium welding wire and I tape it to the edge of the disc, because then that will give me a little bit of a floating room for a fitment, so that I know I'm not wedging the caliper bang onto the disc. It gives me a little bit of a gap. Now I'm going to want the caliper to sit about here, sit about there. So my bracket I've got to make has got to go from this hole to this hole to that hole to that hole, and it looks like I'm going to have to run a spacer in there, probably, I don't know, 10 mil maybe spacer, but I'll gauge that up. The hand tools we're using, set squares, verniers or digital calipers, whatever you want to use them, Sharpies, flapper discs, drill, and I'm going to cut it with an angle grinder rather than the jig. I'm trying to avoid using all the big boy stuff over there. So yeah, so first tip is to run a bit of wire around the disc like that. Just gives you that gap, so you're not hitting the disc directly onto the caliper, or the caliper directly onto the disc. And then I'll set about now. So I've got some 8mm aluminium plate, nice billet, aircraft aluminium billet plate that was got out of a scrap bin. And we're going to use that for our bracket. We'll do a basic bracket setup first of all, where I'll centre these. I'll have a rough area of where I want those other two bolt holes to go for the caliper. I'll drill these out, offer the caliper up, and mark where I need the other two holes. Those other two holes. It's going to be like that, I think. Drill them out, so I'll fit it so it's just the square bit of billet alley that I've got, and then we can draw some nice fancy shapes, and we can cut it out with a flapper disc and put it on the polisher, put a stamp in it, and then that'll be our bracket towards the end of the day. But let's get cracking. Right, we've ended up with a rough shape, very rough shape. Bolted on. We'll off our caliper up and see where we sit, and see what I've got to take off and what I haven't. I've got to take a bit off here. So a bit of a rough guide. I need that bolt hole to be at the bottom. So this needs sculpting out here a little bit. Probably less, more than that. Sculpting out of there a little bit, going around there. That allows for that. And then that other bolt hole's about here somewhere. We need to bring that in. Like that. And then up there. So I would say that's kind of our rough shape there. That should give us, we're going to come out to that further line there. So I'm going to cut that out. I'm going to cut that out. That's about there. That was about there. I can offer the caliper up and get them exact when I'm ready to go. I'll cut it out using just a disc grinder, or a bit of help from a hacksaw maybe. We'll see how we get on. Refusing to use the mill. That's quite a chunky bit of aircraft billet. We'll see how we get on. I'm going to probably have to weld some nice collars on the back there. So, but yeah, that's alley welding. But if you're doing it from a home bracket or whatever, then we'll have to make some spaces up. But I'll get this cut out and we'll see how we get on. Rough. It's rough. It's rough. Can I use the mill, please? There's obviously going to be a lot more shaping going on. Where are we? It's quiet. Nice and quiet in here today. Really lovely. My favourite. My peoples. I've normally got my music blaring out. Doesn't help, stupid YouTube copyright thing. Because without music, I tend to get a bit stuck in my head. And it's not a great place to be on your own. Not in my head anyway. It's strange enough as it is. Right, let's have a little look at what we got. That's a bit better, gives us a bit more clearance. I can get onto that caliper there because that was hitting. So we're going to have some more out of that. Oh, in actual fact, that bolt hole's ending up around here. That one's definitely still about there. Aha. I had all the good Sharpies from Tomboy. From Diamante. I'll give her all the ones that are run out of ink, and I'll give her blunt drill bits. Vernier cages that haven't got any batteries in them. I think it makes for good good entertainment, I think. For me, unfortunately, I could lose this. I could lose loads of that. Look at that. And then come out there with that. Yeah, because that's way tucked in there, that is. A little bit more off of there, please. Well, I can't see that. Alright, let's keep going. Nobody said this was a quick process. Okay, here we are. Very rough. Very rough, yep. We've got some nice bit of shaping to do, make it look nice. Bit of a chamfer, maybe polish it, blah, 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 blah. But that is where we're at. With that gap in the back there, that's what we're going to space her out there. Probably make some nice washers for that, but that's where it sits at the moment. Got full pad contact on the disc, which is really good. We just got to make that ugly mofo piece of whatever the frick the hell that turned out to be look nice. So give me 5 minutes with a flapper disc. Let's see what I can come up with. It's a finishing disc, but quite a rough one. I'll just carry on putting some finish on this. We'll see what it looks like in a minute. Dinky little polisher, but it's really good for small parts. Happy days. We'll get a little stamp in it. Still pretty hot, pretty shiny. Happy days. Right, just these spacers to make now. Spacers for in here. And then cut all the bolts to length properly, get some nylock nuts on it. I might, it's really hard to point at something when you film. I might drill these and lock wire them. Do like a little funky little lock wire thing going on. That might look quite trick. There's a little bit of news about this bike. Yeah, the little bit of news is that the guys from DL Cycle Fab up in Manchester, who are good friends of ours actually, good friends of Mint's, are building a shovel head. And they said, do you want to do a build-off? I was like, oh my God. Because then that puts a little bit of jeopardy in there. Do I want to do a build-off? Oh, by the way, I'll just show you the aftermath of making that funky little bracket. Look at the state of this. And all that aluminium dust there, do yourself a favour. Try and keep it out of your grinders and out of your... Give them an airline off afterwards, because look... And you get that aluminium dust in your motors, it kills them. So it's just a little tip. Anyway, yeah, back to this. That's the rear Brembo setup that is done already. Now the front's sitting through there. Quite funky, actually. I might put another little mint stamp on the back there. Yeah, they want to do a build-off. Mint, obviously, me, or Mint being me, but Mint and them. And I said, yeah, bollocks, yeah, let's do it. So now pressure's on. Pressure's on to build a really kick-off shovel head to try and cope with what they're doing, because they do some really cool stuff. Go and check them out anyways, DL Cycle Fab.